The biggest problem was that I understood why she was doing it. The fewer people who knew a secret, the fewer who could tell it. We were both safer if she told me only what I needed to know, and that would have been enough, if I trusted her, which I didn't. "May I help you with your bag, miss?" the ticket officer in front of me asked. I'd shown him my ticket, and all I needed was for him to wave me forward onto the train. Why should he feel the need to have a conversation, too? But he did, so I replied as politely as possible. "Thank you, sir, but I can manage." I had to manage because my bag was hiding 3 Luger pistols and a pack of bullets. If he loaded it onto the train, he might wonder why it was so heavy. Maybe become suspicious. He gestured to the Nazi officer at the far end of the platform to come over. Our mission would end before it had begun. When he reached for the bag anyway, I straightened up and offered a pleasant smile. "Really, sir, I'm fine." "Very well," he said, friendly, oblivious, completely unaware. A few minutes later, Esther and I boarded the train. She followed me in silence from one compartment to another. I wanted a space that was more full than empty, because I wanted to choose who my compartment mates were rather than have it chosen for me after I was seated. We wouldn't enter the first one, full of Germans, including 2 women who were chatting about surprising their officer husbands in moods. A large Polish man in the second compartment had his eye on me, though I hoped it was because he thought I was pretty and nothing more. The third compartment held an elderly couple, the wife already napping on her husband's shoulder, and a mother with 2 young children. They'd keep her too busy to notice us, I hoped. I pulled open the compartment door, and we went inside. The train was already leaving the station. Whatever happened on this journey, we were committed now. There would be no escape. Chapter 13. February 15th, 1943. Train to Lodz. Before we entered the carriage, I'd done a quick survey to find the nearest exit. If there was trouble, our only choice might be to force the doors open and jump even onto rocks, rather than be captured. I doubted Esther could make herself leap from a moving train, which led to a question I had to ask myself. Would I abandon her if that was the only way to save my life? I felt terrible even considering that, with Esther right there next to me. I felt worse knowing my answer to that question. She sat near the window, allowing me to occupy the more visible middle seat. A young girl was at my side, only 4 or 5 years old. No doubt she'd felt the effects of war, yet she still looked healthy and happy and had a doll that was entertaining her, at least for now. Across from me were the elderly couple, the mother and a toddler boy, who'd nearly pulled the communication cord at least 6 times. Already, in this model of train, a tug on that cord automatically triggered the brakes and would guarantee a visit from an angry engineer to see who had interrupted the trip. Most of the time the cords were covered, but this one was exposed. If I'd noticed that before we sat down, we'd have chosen another compartment. For her part, Esther was doing exactly what she should, or better. She'd already opened a book from her bag, one with a velvet cover that had a gold cross stamped onto it. She immediately bent low to read it. I doubted that she cared a single zloty for the book, though its contents might be useful for her one day. More important, her hair fell over her face as she read, and would probably remain that way for the entire trip. No one would get a good look at her, and no one would question why that was. It was clever enough that I wished I had thought of it too. I passed the trip staring out the window. Although there was wisdom in keeping my face turned from the rest of the passengers, I also genuinely enjoyed the scenery. In one moment I saw a rolling hillside with the occasional farmhouse, the winter snow finally beginning to melt on the western slopes, looking completely untouched by war. In the next moment the war returned, with long, jagged scars in the land where a skirmish might have taken place, or a village with Nazi flags or rows of freshly dug graves. Then the train pushed on, and the scene returned to normal again. I leaned back and closed my eyes, wondering, if I survived this war, could I ever return back to normal again? Could one go back to who one was in an earlier time? That didn't seem possible, which saddened me, but at the same time energized me. I was stronger now than I ever used to be, more independent and confident. I was also more cynical and detached. I knew that. It was more of what I didn't like about myself, but it had kept me alive, allowed me to do what I had to do. It was why I hadn't spoken a word to Esther, even though we'd been traveling for over an hour by now. Our complete silence must look unnatural to the other passengers. Reluctantly, I took a deep breath and leaned over to Esther. "Enjoying the ride?" She looked up with an arched brow, as if she had no idea I could speak. Yes," she stammered. In what appeared to be an attempt at politeness, the older gentleman across from me gestured around our carriage and said, "These rides are better now." "Oh?" This ride seemed no different from any other, bumpy and loud, but unpleasant nonetheless. "The trains are Juden-free now." Esther's head shot up. "Why should that matter?" she asked, clearly offended. "What did the Jews ever do but ride here, same as the others?" I wanted to kick Esther again, hard enough this time to get her head back down in that book. Aside from the fact that this man would perceive her behavior as being uncommonly rude, I also didn't like the darkening of the expression as he looked at Esther, studying her, suspicious. Raising his voice, he added, "The Jews are known to carry diseases, typhus and lice, who knows what else. Look at the ghettos for proof of that." It was true that the ghettos had disease, but we were not the cause of it. No one would be able to live in such close quarters, usually without running water, with no way to rid themselves of the trash that collected, and with little access to medical care, and not face disease. Disease followed the Jews into the ghetto. We did not bring it. I smiled, the same smile I wore for the Nazis at the ghetto gates. The same smile that hid the venom pulsing through me. The trains are less crowded now, that's true. The man paused while the toddler let out a cry, still upset that his mother wouldn't let him reach for the cord, then said, "Poland is less crowded now. Before long, the Jewish problem will be solved for good." Beside me, Esther had a white-knuckle grip on her book. She needed to ignore him, or at least pretend that this conversation held no interest for her. Desperate for any distraction from managing her children, the boy, who was reaching for the communication cord for at least the 13th time that hour, and the girl, who had begun repeatedly throwing her doll on the floor to have an excuse to climb down and pick it up, the mother cut in, saying, "There is no Jewish problem. The problem is with the rest of us who pass beside the ghetto walls with a fresh loaf of bread, knowing the people are starving on the other side, and yet we do nothing." She sat taller. "I throw the loaf over whenever it's safe and pray that it gets found. I pray for those people every day, and so should you. What is happening to the Jews is pure evil. I don't wish them harm, of course, but evil is a strong word," the man said, shuffling the weight of his sleeping wife's head on his shoulder. "I'm only saying that the Germans have done us a favor by moving them out of Poland." "They're still in Poland," Esther said, "behind the ghetto walls and inside the barbed wire fences of extermination camps." "Extermination camps?" The man arched a brow. "There's no such thing. Maybe you are Anticipating his next word, I opened my mouth and diffused his suspicions. But before I could speak, the train lurched forward as its brakes locked. The mother protectively pulled her toddler boy onto her lap. Then her eyes darted meaningfully from me to the train doors. The boy hadn't pulled the cord. She had. I stood, drawing Esther up with me. I think we're near our stop anyway. My grip on her arm was a merciless pinch, and I intended it that way. The train slowly ground to a halt, and behind us, I heard the train conductor already making his way to each compartment, looking for the person who had pulled the cord. A quick glance back confirmed that a Nazi soldier was with him. We ducked into the closest cove of exit doors, waiting for them to open. Why hadn't they opened yet? "You look in these compartments," the Nazi ordered. "I'll search the rear ones." The ones directly across from where we were standing. He'd see us. I tried to push the doors apart, seeking any gap with my finger. But they weren't budging, and the soldier was almost upon us. The mother immediately darted into the hallway, making such a fuss that all his attention shifted to her. Forgive us. My son pulled the cord. It's my fault." "There's a heavy fine for stopping a train without an emergency," the conductor said. "I can't pay it," she said. "What happened was only an accident." Her boy began crying, almost as if on cue, or perhaps she'd pinched him to make an even bigger scene. Other people packed out of their compartments to see what was happening. The woman began crying too, louder than her son. "Come with me," the Nazi officer said. "We'll settle this in private." He took her arm and led her and her children out of the compartment, away from us. "Will she be in trouble?" Esther asked. "If she is, it's because of us," I snapped. As soon as the doors opened, she hurried down the train steps first, and I followed. We'd just passed through a farm town, and somewhere ahead was a thick patch of woods. But aside from that, I had no idea how far we were from Lodz. I hoisted my heavy bag over my shoulder and led us off the tracks toward the nearest road. We couldn't run. We couldn't look suspicious. Anger rushed through every vein in my body. We were not leaving because of the communication cord. We were leaving because Esther decided to argue. The communication cord probably saved us from her full declaration of our true identities as proof of how wrong that man was. When we were far enough from the train, between gritted teeth, I said, "Our job is not to debate the uniformed. We are here to complete a mission. Nothing more." "But you heard his lies, all that stupidity. How could you sit there like it didn't matter?" "Because it doesn't matter. Not when compared to the larger picture of what we're doing here. You could have gotten us killed. And for what? Did you think you'd change his mind?" "No, he was wrong and hateful, but he is not our enemy." "He is the enemy, Chaya. The war will end one day and the Germans will go back to their own land, but here we must live alongside thousands of people like that man. If we can't stop his hatred, this will happen again and again and again."